Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas and Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. This is the Bucky Inspired series. And today we're going to be looking at the man himself. There is a short interview done at a New York public radio show called Conversations in 1975. So all of us have watched it, and we're going to be talking about our impressions of it. I'm going to get it started, followed by Maritza, and then would love to hear anybody else's thought on the interviews. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark so that I want to get as many people's first impressions about the interview. The focus is trying to understand the man, his thoughts, and what he has to offer us. Once we have done that, I'm going to collect all the points about, try to keep track of everything everybody's saying, and then we will have a general discussion on the topic. So that's the plan. All right. So I was blown away by the interview, the first 15 minutes. So I'm just going to focus on the first 15 minutes of it. It was like each sentence was carrying so much. He starts off by saying, I'm an ordinary human being, just like you. Okay. And that's profoundly true. And he says, if you choose to face reality directly, then you can do what I'm doing. It's not something unusual. You just have to be willing to face reality. And then he makes a really crucial point. He says, I have an exile's perspective. I thought that was a critical thing, because most of us are too much in the system, too much off the system, too much by the system of what is around us, that we don't have a perspective on it. He said he was exiled. So his external perspective, I think that's a crucial part of who he is. So that's the first point. It's anybody, but with a large perspective on humanity itself. The second point is about how. He says it's all about eternal principles. That's what really sets us human beings apart, that we are able to figure out eternal principles that are underlying nature and of human beings and act based on that. And these eternal principles are non-contradictory, and uses the word, I love his words, by the way, interaccommodative. So they actually mesh with one another. And not just that, they have exponential interaction between them. So what they end up producing as a result is much more than an individual. But in order to do that, mind needs to be focused on interrelationships. If you just get focused on a special case, a particular, you will not see the interrelations between them. So that's what the mind needs to do. And in the process, you'll have to build a whole vocabulary. That's what human beings have done. We have to add to it. And he does it in spades. You can see him coming up with different ways of expressing to just capture exactly what he wants to say. And if you do that, principles can make everyone successful. So that was the second part. The third part is, what does this mean for the world? He says most people are just focused on current preoccupations of their lives. And you can't do much just with that, because your nose is to the ground and you're not really focused on principles. You need to look at it as a global system, and a completely different picture emerges. You have to realize that our game is problem solving, not just at the global level, but also local level. So you need to have that external perspective and then be able to apply it to anything that you're doing. And if you do that, and you move from the scarcity mindset to the abundance mindset, you move from just trying to defend yourself, protect yourself, to actually living. So move from weaponry to livingery. It's also very cognizant of how much civilization has done for all of us. He's saying, look, there is this tremendous thing human beings have done, and I'm lucky to find myself here as a beneficiary of everything that has happened. And without preconceptions, as an exile, I'm able to look and see what this thing means and what you can do. And then he builds up on that by using ideas like ephemeralization as a way of kind of concentrating things and doing more and more with less and less as a means of progressing. I want to end with two things. He says, I have to do my own thinking. I think that is a most important thing. You have to independently look at the world. If you don't do that, really, you're not doing much as a human being. You're leaving aside the great gift you have as a human being. And as an aside, I want to say the last thing. He's talking about the importance of two-way communication. It's not just broadcast. And that's what this is. This is two-way communication. Each of us is speaking. Each of us is listening. And we are all interacting to build something really spectacular. So that's my take on this interview. Next up is Maritza. Please go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Would love to hear what each of you got from the interview. Go ahead, Maritza.
So I have just I have some sound bites, as it were, from the interviews. I do want to say first, I want to piggyback off of the last thing that Shrikant just said about he had to do his own thinking. Even more impressive is that he makes, in that statement, he gives the honor to his wife by telling folks that she gave him the gift of handling anything that required communication for him to the extent which she was able for 2 years. So she allowed him for about 2 years to speak almost nothing. He said there were exceptions with obviously his wife and his child, but she allowed him, and he said he felt that that was necessary so that he could undo all the bad habits of I forget exactly the exact phraseology he used, but about, the bad habit of speaking useless things, as it were, or not thinking for himself. And I think that, to me, that also shines a spotlight on the type of man that he was. He never shies away from, telling it as it is. He gives credit where credit is due. So that was just kind of a small anecdote I wanted to add to that. But I feel like it's just another aspect that you get to see of Bucky that adds to this view of a man walking his philosophy. And so a couple, just some statements I pulled out that he said that were intriguing to me, and they're a little bit further in on the videos. I didn't actually write down the minutes, sorry guys. So nature had the mathematics itself. So when he was speaking about how they discovered an actual molecule that looked like his geodesic domes, he was saying that he used mathematics, and to him it was so obvious that naturally nature would have fit into that because it was just common sense. And he says, if you did what nature wanted done, you would find yourself getting on instead of what the system said you ought to do. And to me, that's just another way of saying this same thing of do your own thinking, as it were. And it brings to me to mind what we see in Critical Path, and we see in a couple other of his works, the this idea that nature has the things that we need to focus on in order to help propel humanity and the world forward. And when he talks about, how, the square, just nothing in nature that's square, I think it stems from this statement. And he also tells us, he says, we should commit oneself to trying to make human beings a success. And he says that in the first set of interview. And then the last portion, where it's a second interview, he says, he takes that and goes a step further. And he says, the problem is that most of us suffer from ego. He says you have to set your ego aside or you'll never find success. And I thought that was, I had not heard anything of him before speaking specifically about the ego, even though I'd heard him often speak of, where we're trying to do is push humanity forward and not ourselves. But it was just so impactful to hear him say that in black and white, that, it's the ego is what's tripping us up. And this from a man who, has 48 honorary degrees. It's just something to hear. And he has, all these accolades, but he's also telling us that, he was just a throwaway. And it shows, again, I feel like hearing him say the ego is what gets in the way was shocking because of the fact that he shows us how he himself does not allow his ego to take over. And he speaks of that with pride when he says that, he never tried to make money. He never allowed anyone to, himself to become a media circus, as it were. So I think that it's, again, he is someone who's living his philosophy. And in that one, it was just shocking to me because the realization that I had never actually literally heard him say that before is what struck me, because I had heard it over and over in his philosophy, using different words. And then, one that we've all heard him say, and this one's, you just can't ever just skim by it, is dare to be naive. Right after he said that in this interview, he says, that's the only way you'll ever learn anything. And I think that's really, it's that the power to be brave enough to do something despite your fear, despite the uncertainties and the unknowns. I think that it's bigger than we give it credit for. He talks about how in the world, we just decided we would stop being vulnerable. And essentially what he's telling us is the idea that we're hindering ourselves from getting to that learning if we're not allowing ourselves to be naive and to not know some things. And there's a couple, that theme is interwoven throughout much of what he says. He does tell us, he says, and this is closer towards the end, he says, the big story out there right now is that we are living in an incredible mystery. The more you know how little you know, and the more mysterious it all seems to be. Like he's telling us the fact that, everything gets more and more mysterious, but you get closer to actually learning something. He says, we really don't know all there is to know about anything. People get a cause, whether it's within a community or whether it's in the world, and they forget that that cause was born out of not knowing what to do with themselves. So even this idea of finding one's purpose, it's important not to forget that you found your purpose because you at one point had none and didn't know things. That to me is a very soft admonition, again, against letting your ego take over. And and that's right around there after when he tells us to remember that we're a throwaway. And he says we are great programs of integrity. He says, we're integrity externally regenerative universe. I think that is something that I wish I would have liked to have heard a little more on, the idea of the very act of just seeking to propel others forward while putting to the side our ego is an act of integrity. I think that's a really key point. And it's one of those things that he doesn't have to explicitly say, because we can see it over and over in much of his life story. You know, if one looks at his chronophile, that's what we can see. And so those are some of the big things that I got out of that. And I will stop there, Shikant, and I can jump in later if necessary.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Would love to hear what you got from the video. And once we have everybody's thoughts on the table, we can discuss everything together. Next up is, give me just a second here. Let me unmute everybody. Okay. Next up is Kirby. Kirby, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I recognize this interview, and where my head's at right now, I mean, this might not have always been my reaction, but I'm very focused on kind of TV production values and who the interviewer is. Like, I was reading the YouTube description. This particular upload, there's been others, isn't very specific about when this interview was and all that, but I think it was New Dimensions Radio. So as we're talking here, I'm exploring back and looking at websites. I'm actually kind of interested in the interviewer, the guy who interviews Bucky. Like, what was his name? And then I think going down this rabbit hole before, he didn't really live many years beyond this interview. I feel like he might have passed away within 5 years of this, but I'm not sure. Like, these are the kind of things that are in my head. Like, who is that guy? Didn't he die early? Blah, blah. And so I'm going around the website and looking at this, taking screenshots from the interview. Because going forward, it's like, how is it going to interface between like what we're doing right now? I think is really useful and healthy way to be doing the Bucky stuff, which is meeting in small groups over Zoom and having these kind of conversations. I can't think of a much better way at this point to be doing things around Bucky, is to be like telling each other what we think and stuff. So again, Shrikant, I hope your voice comes back. I don't know if this because you're doing this kind of meetup 24/7. I'm surprised you have a voice at all from years of doing this, but
no, I think it was because I stopped doing the meetups. I went on a vacation that my voice gave out. My voice works very well if I'm talking all the time.
Right, you're like a highly trained athlete, and if you just goof off for a couple weeks, it all goes to hell, right? Anyway, I also want to mention, because we're kind of I mean, I don't get to all these meetups, but I've tracked them and I watch quite a few of them offline and stuff. But you've had Richard Ramsey on, right? He talked about network or social configurations and how he's been inspired by Bucky, partly because how Bucky was suicidal. And I'm looking at him here now, you know, he's all dressed up. He's an old man, and he's spoken with people are so deferential and respectful. And he's at the peak of his game, I would say. This is the Bucky success. And he really is dressed nicely, I have to say. I mean, unlike me, I'm kind of wearing a sackcloth kind of monk looking thing. I've got a Guinness sweater on. I just took my dog for a walk and stuff. But anyway, I'm just thinking the public interface. I always think of Bucky as he was not a boomer. He was what would others say? I call him what do I call him again? A bohemian, like the Bohemians. People used to talk about them. And you don't realize, maybe looking at him all dressed up like this, that he had a chapter in Greenwich Village where he was like, you know, mixing it up with the intellectuals. He like craved intellectual stimulation and company. And he got a lot of his chops, I think, hanging out in Romany Marie's, I don't know what to call it, coffee shop. I think you could get liquor there, though. It wasn't just like a coffee shop, but if you know what I mean. She was called the Queen of Greenwich Village, and she knew how to hook people up. People would come to her place and she would tune in everything people were saying. It's like, you got to meet this person. And I believe it's through her that he got teamed up with Isamu Noguchi, and they were lifetime friends. And I went to see the museum exhibit called something like Best of Friends. That's what it was called. And it was all about Noguchi and Bucky's collaboration throughout the years, and also sharing apartments and stuff. And I don't know the whole story, right? it's interesting how Bucky, really his closest collaborators, tended to be of Japanese heritage. Kiyoshi Kuramiya, Isamu Noguchi, and Soji Sadao. These are some of the main characters that really worked closely with the guy. I just point that out. I'm not trying to make any big point, I guess. I really respect what you guys are doing. And I wanted to say that Richard, I met him yesterday here in Portland. He was here for like the 53rd meetup of this branch of American Sociology Institute, or I forget, but his group called Living Works, I guess. And the whole topic of the conference is suicide and suicidology, right? That's a whole discipline. And I've been apprenticing myself to Richard. It's like he's a world expert in this, and I know him through Bucky, and he knows. He, I think, was inspired by Bucky and started talking up Bucky in his workshops, and then found out how important that suicide story and Bucky being suicidal, how important that was to Bucky's autobiography, how he always wove it back in. However much it morphed and changed over the years, however he told it. I figure if it's your life story, you have the right to shape that at least. But yeah, it all came together for him too. And that's where the ego side came. Maritza was talking about, does he talk about ego? And where he does tend to talk about ego when he gets into it is when he talks about being suicidal. And it's like, I think his ego was devastated at that point. He felt totally like a failure. His first daughter had died. He wasn't properly taking care of his wife. There's a story that Al Capone would carry the groceries up the steps. They lived in a Chicago tenement at that point where you didn't have any elevators or whatever. And he actually knew Al Capone. Like they were, he was an interesting. One thing I'll end here shortly, but one thing I want to say about Bucky is what I find refreshing about him is he's not super judgmental. And when he opens Critical Path, he says, let's be clear on one thing. There's no good or bad people in this book. He's not trying to get our agreement that here are the bad people, here are the people we should demonize. That doesn't mean he's wishy-washy. He kind of takes positions, but he kind of oscillates. You think he's getting too hard on capitalism, and then he flips around and it's like he's a great pirate capitalist. And then he gets down on socialism, but then he flips around and it's like, at least they're taking care of their people or whatever. He's like, he described this as, you know, kind of, as you're getting more precise, you kind of wiggle back and forth, but less and less amplitude because you are zooming in on, honing in on your target. So you kind of spiral in a tighter and tighter way. And I find this true of Bucky, that it's fun to read him because he's not trying to inspire hate and outrage. And when I'm on YouTube all day, I spend a lot of time on YouTube. So much of the content is that. And this interview, again, refreshing because Bucky is not trying to inflame, right? And that's a breath of fresh air. Anyway, I'll stop at that point.
Thank you, Kirby. Fantastic points. And I want to follow up on some of these, but I'm going to give a chance for everybody to put their thoughts in, and then would love to follow up on the Bohemian, the Japanese. I thought about the transcendentalist angle, you know, this wiggling back and forth. There's just lots of things to talk about. So would love, and I love the richness and the color of everything that you're putting on the table. So thank you. All right, folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark to talk about what you got from this interview. Next up is Chad. Chad, go ahead.
Sure. I think it's already been kind of brought up that the interview demonstrates his theories on duality. He's a walking experiment in duality, and that's how he describes nature. So he's constantly going from the ego to a servant who's serving others, and fluctuating back and forth in a way that isn't contradictory, but it's graspable to the audience when they're listening to him, but it also makes it difficult to convey to others because there's not a strong point. He's presenting very lofty ideas at a very basic level, and I think the audience has trouble digesting that and sharing that, and that's one of the reasons why he's not embraced by academia, and his legacy on campus is very mixed. So I think that's demonstrated. I think his life, he was very conscious of the window that he was living in, being born before the Model T and then dying in the 80s. He knew that we would be talking on the internet 20 years later about him, 40 years later, talking about him in teleporting, as he would say, and learning via video cassette. That's what he thought we would be doing, but here we are learning by YouTube and Zoom, and he would absolutely be astounded that we're putting in practice what exactly he described. He was very conscious that that evolution and critical path that he saw in the 20th century was just huge, great leaps in technology that he wanted to be a part of, but oftentimes failed in trying to be a part of, but didn't really let that stop him at all or from inspiring others. So I think watching him on YouTube might be the best medium to experience him in, but you can experience his writing, and you can go visit the places that he built and lived in and worked in. So there's many different ways that you can actually track him down. I think he was very intentional about that. And I think that's why we celebrate Earth Day and his contributions to nature, but he also wasn't afraid to build stuff and contribute to the civilized world in the built environment too. That didn't scare him either. So duality is really what he's practicing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chad. Great observations. Thank you. Next up is going to be Evanik. Folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to put your thoughts on the table. Once we have everybody's thoughts, then we'll go ahead and have a general discussion on everything. I'm trying to list everybody's, all the key points that I see from what everybody's saying, and then I'll put them back on the table, and then you guys can pick up on anything that you want to pick up on. But I would love to hear more people talking about the interview itself. Evanik.
Yeah, what struck me about the interview was the beginning when Bucky talks about his early life. And what strikes me is that when he started to think for himself, his mother was like, you need to know that you need to listen to what people are trying to teach you, and she meant well, just like people, like his educators meant well, because that's the model that they were taught, is that you have to learn from the teacher. And I bring up his early life because when he was in the Navy, he didn't seem to mind being in the Navy. He makes it very clear that he doesn't like to play the game, but the Navy didn't bother him. And it was telling to me, and I was trying to figure out like why, because it's like giving orders, but for whatever reason, in looking at what Bucky had in other series, like he kind of was getting something from it, and it seemed like he was learning like the secrets of war or something, and it was clicking to him. So I thought that was just interesting. I think too, when he talked about young people and how young people were dismissed, and especially at the time that this interview was taken, which seemed like it was in the 80s. And it was that age of children are seen and not heard. And it was very much, like education was very much listen to your teacher. Don't question your teacher. Don't question anything. And he just recognized that young people have so much to give. And this was a man in his 80s. I think someone said that he was not a boomer, he was bohemian. I think that's true, in that he really did recognize the contribution that everyone had to make. And Maritza was talking about, the dismissal of his ego, and how he talks about ego. And I think that's part of it, is that he recognized that he could learn from other people, as well as still keep true to his own thinking. And I think that's a very important point, because you can learn from other people, but you should still think for yourself. You should really have that knowledge and stay true to who you are, but let people in. And that vulnerability of letting people in and saying and letting them prove to you, like, if you are wrong about something, letting people in to test that, to make sure that you're thinking the right way. And if you're not, then you change it, which is still doing your own thinking, which is different than what he was taught, especially, I think it was the First World War, that, that era. He was born in 1895, where it was definitely a case of you do what other people tell you. So he was a revolutionary in that mindset. And so I think that beginning of his life, and then, when he talked about the reason why he had to leave the Navy because of his daughter, his first daughter, who passed away, and then him being suicidal, and he was, you're thinking he's 32, he has so much life, but he brought it into perspective of that when he was born in 1895, the life expectancy for someone born at that time was 42 years old. So he felt like his life was just practically over anyway, that he wouldn't be any good to anybody, especially to his wife and to his child that was here. And he brings a spotlight on mental health and, that despair that people feel. And he did it in a way that didn't make it seem, I don't want to say it's not wrong, but he didn't make it seem like like he was a bad person for having those thoughts, and that anybody else that had those thoughts were bad people. He didn't frame it like that. He just framed it. He looked at his life and he said, this is what I was feeling at this time, and this is the reason why I was thinking I could take my life. Is that he was 32, he didn't have life insurance, he wasn't getting life insurance because people in his life expectancy was 42. He just saw no path forward. And the simple fact that he overcame that was very much telling of who he is and how he started to think for himself. And the simple fact that, he lost a lot of people's money in the beginning too, not to mention that, like, that was all on him. And he wasn't making money for his wife and his daughter in an age where that is exactly what a man was supposed to do. He was supposed to provide for his family. But that, and I think something is telling too about, and he talks about his wife and the people that supported him. I think one of the beautiful things about his life is that when he was true to himself, the people that were true to him stayed with him. And those people that weren't true to him, there was lessons learned. But he didn't focus on the people that weren't true to him. He was focusing on the people that were true to him, because when you are true to yourself, I think you attract people that are true to you. And if people are not true to you, they will reveal themselves. He wasn't worried about, if he was going to get scammed or if he was going to have these things happen. That money making thing that we think about wasn't in his thought process. He knew he had something to contribute to humanity, and his wife supported that, and people around him supported that. And he was like, money comes in. I don't know how it comes in. And I was like, how could you not know how it comes in? And he's like, I have people that know how it comes in, but I don't know how it comes in. He tells the people around him, you can't really do all the advertising and all that normal stuff, but money came in and he just allowed it to happen, and he allowed people to handle it. And he just concentrated on his work. So I just think this interview really brought the humanity to Bucky, I think, for me anyway, for the first time. I'm very new to Bucky, so, but for me, it brought the human to Bucky, and it helped me understand him more.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Avanique. All right, folks, does anybody else want to share their thoughts on this interview? Before I kind of try to, I'm just going to kind of almost poetically go through everything that everybody has said. Last chance, I'm going to give about 10 seconds if somebody wants to add their comments. If you don't speak now, don't worry. You will have plenty of opportunities to do that. By the way, so let me go ahead and just start my piece here. Okay, so firstly, I agree with Kirby that this small group, this interactive group, is really the best way to explore Bucky, and it actually goes with his style too. Very experiential, wiggling back and forth, putting things out, listening to people, not having the ego of saying, okay, look, I'm going to push this thing through, having a genuine dialogue. And the deep base of that is, for Bucky, I think, is transcendentalism, where you're saying that, there is the unknown unknown. There is the Tao. And that is the foundation. You can never forget that. You know some things, but you know only some things. Actually, the more you know, the more you get a sense of the grandeur of the Tao. And so this is this odd feeling of being ambitious at once because you think you're a child of the Tao. So you should try to know the Tao as best as you can. At the same time, the humility, where you say, there is a lot more here than whatever I can figure out. So this combination of ambitious humility and openness and confidence at the same time. And that is exactly what it appears to be very messy, very non-academic, non-Platonic, very interactive, just this idea of Bucky sitting there talking and just going through everything. No silos, just one world, one universe that you're talking about, and just go back and forth. I want to start out at the rock bottom, because I don't think that Bucky would have been Bucky without the rock bottom. To realize that this thing is bankrupt. I'm at the end of this. This is really not working. Whatever it has been sold to me, it's really not something. And then saying no to that and building on your own experience. That's what he did. It's a very hard thing to do, but you have to say no in order to build in a clean way. Otherwise, things that you're attached to are going to keep bringing you back to your old ways. So that is something that is, I think, key part of it, this life-changing situation. And with that, the determination to say, okay, I'm going to understand the world based on my own experience as best as I can. And yes, I'm going to be wrong, but that's all I can do. But that's what I can do. The style of the Bohemian style of very interactive, it seems like a child almost. He will go and talk to anybody, go back and forth with anybody, actually give the people a hearing, wiggle back and forth, the point that Kirby was making, once he will make this point, and then there's a whole bunch of people and they say, yes, 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 yes. And they are all fixed there. And the next moment he's here because he's trying to, this is a point about the dualistic nature. The most fundamental dualism I see here is going back and forth between physical and metaphysical, between local and global, between temporal and the eternal. And he goes just effortlessly between these things, between the Tao and the 10,000 things. Let me see. The idea of, putting your ego aside is a key part of this kind of messiness, this kind of confidence in the Tao, and regarding yourself as a child of the Tao. And the crucial part is that of integrity. It's a very deep idea of, respecting the authenticity of your own understanding. These are some of the things that stood out to me as people were speaking. Would love to hear any more comments. You can pick up on any of these themes that you would like. We're talking about, about Bucky the man, but and his ideas. So feel free to pick up on any of these things. I'm going to start with Kirby, followed by Evanique, followed by Maritza. Kirby, and please take your time. Okay. Oh, just a second. Let me make sure I can unmute. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Kirby, please.
Sure. I thought I just, having heard comments between my last comments and now, like, what did Fuller get out of the Navy was a good question. And some of those, like, here's how I see it, is he was pretty disillusioned even as a very young guy, like pre-college. He wasn't buying what I think a lot of us feel browbeat into buying. Like, you have to get through math so you can have a good job. You kind of have to cave to authority at some point. And he had that kind of fearlessness that I think, Alex in his biography talks about Bucky's kind of a Brahmin, like a New England Brahmin. His family didn't have a lot of money really, but they had that kind of attitude that they weren't subservient in a way. And so he wasn't going to believe in infinite number of digits of pi or whatever they were trying to teach him. And I think when it got to Harvard, it kind of just reinforced his sense that academia was kind of BS. I mean, his detractors like to say he couldn't cut the mustard. He wasn't really smart enough to be an academic, and that's why synergetics is a disaster. Now, I don't believe that. I think he was really smart, but he also didn't fit in to the academic scene. He was kind of flamboyant, and he really did feel attracted to show business. And I think if he were born in modern times or whatever, he probably would have, been like a showman. He would have quit Harvard, but he'd use that just like Bill Gates or somebody. You don't disavow Harvard. He was always a Harvard man and like a flag waving. I went to Princeton. I play that up because I know it's to my social benefit, except sometimes. But I'm just saying he wasn't really fitting into academia, and he got expelled partly because he took a whole show business group out to dinner one night or paid for their drinks and all that. But when he got to the Navy, because it was war, I think, yes, he was really intrigued by radio, which was just coming into being, and the whole idea of frequencies and people communicating on different frequencies and needing to jam some, and secrets and cryptography. I think that later informed his thinking and his work and his writing. He writes about frequency all the time, and the radio metaphor is always there. And I think he got that from his time in the Navy a lot, and his officer training in Annapolis. He talks about that a lot, how global the perspective was. He felt at last a fresh air. These aren't Harvard academics. These aren't landlubbers. This is a proud maritime tradition going back through the British Empire, where they just spontaneously think in global terms. And when he had his crisis and his ego side or whatever, his first step, and with support from his wife, like he couldn't just do this and be a jerk about it. He had to have community support. And he didn't really stop talking. He says as much in some of his own accounts, like he'd answer the door and stuff, but he retreated into himself in a very deep way, and he kind of started over. And I think he started over, unlike a lot of sort of spiritual types who have a crisis and go towards enlightenment. He went towards, what do I know about the whole world? Like, I'm going to take all this global data, all this experience I've had being in the Navy, being in business, working for armor meat packing, whatever I've done, and I'm going to take that deep into my soul, and with this new self that I'm creating who wants to help all humanity, and not in some sentimental way, because the first question he asked is that even doable? Like, what do I mean by wanting to help humanity, all humanity? Is that even feasible? And so he goes back to Malthus and he starts studying what the world beliefs are. And he'd been exposed to this through the Navy and somewhat. It's like, are we in a life and death struggle because population is exponential and food is only increasing arithmetically and blah, blah. That's the Malthusian thing. How big a crisis is this? And he saw the exponential curves of technology and how humans were just rocketing into the future. And he was seeing that happen in his own lifetime. And I don't think, this will be my last comment for now, that, he wouldn't have kept going with this experiment if he didn't start seeing such dramatic results so quickly. Like, he's thinking of suicide in 27 and just 1927. Just a few years later, he's inventing a new kind of car. He's having all these insights about geometry. See, that's the thing. We're not there in his mental life, but I think the fireworks started going off and he wasn't even taking drugs. He was just all of a sudden being hit with what later became synergetics and having these amazing insights. And he would reality check, and there was enough confirmation that he was onto something. This mental attitude where we can all make it as a species. This is our time on planet Earth to do a breakthrough and really make it happen. And I'm here as one of those people that's going to make it happen. And everything in my life is confirming that to me, because everything's taking off. Everything's going my way in a way. So he didn't feel like a marginalized, I can't get anything done or nobody listens to me or anything. Pretty soon, I think he felt deep inside that he was really progressing quickly and therefore he was on to something. So there was enthusiasm there going forward. He was easy to be around because he wasn't resentful. He even when he died, he kind of made intrigue out of it. He got that woman who wrote Child of Spaceship Earth to come to the Waldorf Astoria in Chicago. And it was kind of like this cloak and dagger interview where he tells her, look, everyone's going to make me an enemy. I'm going to fade out here and they're going to try to make you forget me. And I'm going to be like this underground figure. Bye. And then he kind of disappears. And she spends her whole life trying to figure out how to tell this story. And she came out with a pretty good book about that whole thing. But I think even in his final days is what I'm saying. He didn't go out bitterly. He went out by throwing another log on the fire. And here we are. Okay, stop there.
Thank you, Kirby. And you can come back for more. I just really, really like what you're saying. I want to just comment on one thing, because this point keeps coming up across multiple meetups. I think what Bucky is doing is much higher than academia, because what academia does is that they just take these silos and they're working on the silos. And what he's doing is that he's just saying no to that. And part of it is just starting by saying no to that. Because then what it does is that it drops all these artificial boundaries that, other people have put across their disciplines for almost like power reasons, for all kinds of reasons, okay? Power, funding, prestige, whatever it is. And he's then just communing directly with the universe. And universe, as he sees it, is not just physical universe, but metaphysical. He's engaging with basically everything everybody has said. So for him, like Navy is part of the universe. And actually they are able to deal with the universe far better than these academics, because they're actually thinking on a global scale. So to me, it is very natural that he took to the Navy. I read his, Great Pirates, you have to be in that kind of a mindset. And this is completely consistent with that. So there are those two ways of being. There is the academic way of being, which is platonic, siloed, ideas come first, and then somehow you fit reality into it. You can see that in the Platonic geometry, Pythagorean geometry. Or there is a way of saying universe comes first. Let me find out, let me figure out the structure of the universe as best as I can. And you build a geometry, you build ideas based on that. And there is a back and forth. And that's not just one directional, it is two directional. You're doing that in order to transform it, transform the world. You're trying to understand the world and trying to transform it. And in that loop, the conversation you learn, which is dramatically different from the Platonic idea of academia. So, I am all for Bucky, and I don't buy anything that the academics say about Bucky on this. Next up is going to be Evanik, Maritza, and Paul. Evanik.
So so many things have been said since I put up that exclamation point. So the original thought was when you talked about Bucky and ambitious humility. And I just love that phrase. I've never heard it, that those two words come together. And I think it's a perfect description of Bucky. And I think it's also a perfect description of people who Bucky surrounded himself with. And the reason why I say that is because I think ambitious humility, I think some people take the word humility and it means like putting yourself beneath someone else and putting yourself, oh, I'm humble, I'm no better than you, and I'm not that great. That's normal humility. And ambitious humility is what Bucky does, is that he knows like he's a different type of thinker. He knows that this is not conventional thinking, yet he has faith in what he's studying. He has faith in what he's seeing. He has faith in nature. And he talks about it in the video, and he talks about, like we need to rely on nature to take care of us, to sustain us on this earth. And, people are relying on their own, their own thoughts or, their own abilities, and they're ignoring, like he was pointing out, that people were ignoring nature and kind of relying on their own selves, like the intelligence of humanity in order to survive. And he's like, that's not the way we're going to make it. We're going to put ourselves into extinction if we do that. That we have to like kind of work with nature rather than opposed to it. So I think ambitious humility works, especially for Bucky, because especially after listening to him, it works definitely because he is an ambitious, he doesn't make himself above anybody else, but yet he's confident in who he is. And that's who he sticks with. That's what he sticks with, who he is, no matter, what people say. He's going to stick to who he is, and he's going to think for himself, and he's going to, look at what people are saying to him, and he's going to listen to it. He's definitely not the type of person that doesn't listen. He's definitely going to listen to it, but he's going to take it for what it's worth and use it. And so I think ambitious humility is great. And I think that's something that we all should ascribe to, think for ourselves, read the facts, and think and use our own thoughts, but yet be open and vulnerable enough to accept other people's thoughts and to change our thoughts, change our thinking when it is shown that we need to. Like when it is shown that you are definitely wrong and you need to change your thinking, then you change your thinking. Don't let anyone else change your thinking. You have to decide to you have to choose to change your thinking. So I think ambitious humility is what I wanted to comment on. And that's a great point.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, the best capturing of this idea of ambitious humility I've seen in Tao Te Ching. It's the idea of the sage. Tao is what it is. It's the transcendent. The Bucky version of it is transcendentalism, which comes from the Indian context. It is also very similar, but it's captured really beautifully in Tao, in the Tao. What you're saying is Tao is what it is. And I fully accept that. And I am trying to follow the Tao. Whatever I'm doing, now we are talking about the sage, You're trying to act in accordance with the Tao. Whatever I'm doing, the names I'm using, the things I'm building are part of the 10,000 things. If I do it right, it is Wu Wei. It will be effortless. It will be acting without acting. But my eyes are always open. My ears are always open to the Tao. And anything I can learn from Tao to connect, to correct myself, I will do that. So it is ambition in wanting to be one with the Tao, to act in accordance with the Tao. It is humility, and the humility is not with respect to other people. It is humility is with respect to universe itself, the nature itself, of saying, nature comes first, Tao comes first. I am trying my best to follow it. And I will always listen to the feedback of nature. I am an experiment, that is the idea. So wonderful. Thank you so much. Next up is going to be Maritza, Paul, Maurice, and Joe. Maritza.
Speaking of things in nature, I think, so I want to go back to a couple folks mentioned it briefly, and I actually hadn't in my initial chat, was, the low point where Bucky was contemplating committing suicide. You mentioned, Shrikant, about things in nature, and even in this story, he's pointing to us to remember that we also are a thing in nature, right? So I'm not usually one to voluntarily bring up the word faith unless I'm admonishing folks that blind faith in anything is, a dangerous path. But I'm going to bring up the word here because I think that, so, Bucky, he made the decision. It was in his mind, he thought it was a logical, rational decision. I'm penniless. I'm, disgraced. I have nothing to offer except a life insurance policy that my wife can cash in should I commit suicide. So while, yes, he was down and depressed and feeling, all the awful things that one feels to even contemplate such an act, there was also the logic there. And what ended up stopping him was a realization he had. And I want to share with you something that I had found that he said, and I have it written down and I don't remember where I wrote it. I'm sorry, I should have written down the where. I can look that up later. But he wrote, in committing suicide, I seemingly would never again have to feel the pain and mortification of my failures and errors, but the only by experience winnable inventory of knowledge that I had accrued would also be forever lost, an inventory of information that, if I did not commit suicide, might prove to be of critical advantage to others, possibly to all others, possibly to universe. So in that realization, he decided that, though very unlikely, he decided if there was even a 1 in an illion chance that his unique human experiences might be of any evolutionary value to others, then his life was not merely worth living, that it might be said not to belong to him at all, but in fact, to belong only to others. And so this is the moment where he began his very disciplined approach to his life and to serving humanity. So he, in that moment, realized that, the universe is greater than the one. And I think that it's just an amazing story on so many different facets. But this idea, this stripping away of, even when one is at this low point, to say that you owe the universe too much, to even do that. That there is value for your person, for your intellect that transcends your immediate personal gain. And I think that's a very powerful message. And so I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Maritza. I mean, this is, to me, I mean, that episode in his life, to me, it's like resurrection. You know, it's like you have to take on all the pain. You have to kind of live with it, feel it, and then see that there is an eternal principle of life, which is much more than that, and that all of this pain is less, and you're able to overcome that in order to go for that. So thank you so much. Next up is going to be Paul, Maurice, Joe, and Kirby. Paul.
Yeah, thank you. I heard all that in the car, but now I'm able to talk. So and I did see the interview, and I'm so glad you put it up there and suggested it, Shrikant, because the view of his life is so important to me anyway. Not just his ideas, but his actual, as you said, that journey to salvation. And it made me connect more. And I think we've talked so much about science and faith, and there are lots of attempts these days to say, well, science and faith are not incompatible. But there's a way he did it that I really saw more in this interview than I've understood, that I think is just a beautiful example and really important. So, and it has to do with your point of the Tao and the 10,000 things, and that some attempts to reconcile science will religion say, see, modern science shows that your neurochemistry is affected positively by meditation. That doesn't do it. That isn't really reconciling science and religion. What he's doing is saying it's okay to have this faith that the human mind is like a jewel that has a special purpose, and that doesn't mean you're not a scientist. He even claims it's scientifically provable, but I don't care. I don't even think that's true. But the fact that he's, with his really deep knowledge of science, says that and then devotes his life, and it actually saves his life, getting at Richard's work and suicidology and things, to devote himself to that principle that the universe is eternally regenerative, that we are uniquely positioned to express it. It's like so inspiring. So I can debate whether, like I did the other night, whether the precession makes sense to me. It's like, so what? There's this meta of the way he comes out of the box and gets you out of the box, and could get someone, because I'm a therapist, in a suicidal state out of the box. Like, he teaches you how to find a different coordinate system, how to change and in Critical Path, how he's so daring. I think at one point he says, I'm not through it yet, but at one point he says, oh, Darwin's theory should be reversed. And men evolved into, doesn't he say that in there? Men evolved into fish swimming in this. But I'm not saying that's true, but just that's out of the box, man. And so he's a beautiful example. And so I loved it. So I don't know if that adds, but thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate these comments. So first I want to say is that you're absolutely right. You kind of have to understand the context of a person. You know, in any great thinker, I've found that you really need to understand their context. And the thing about his context is that he really faced universe on his own. So in that sense, like, you know, you're talking about the scientists say, okay, with neuroscience, I'm going to do this. That's kind of actually based on not understanding science and not understanding religion. Okay, both together, because you're taking like results. Most scientists they kind of focus on results of science, forms produced by science. And unfortunately, most religious people also focus on forms produced by religion. And then when you're just looking at forms, they are always at odds with one another. So then they all fight against all of these things. What he's doing is that he's going back to the function of, science is simply asking the question, what is it about the universe? And religion is also about that. So it's two different ways of doing the same thing. And he is able to not reconcile them, but he's able to see the commonality between the two disciplines. And he's able to go effortlessly, not just able to see it, but he's able to go effortlessly between them. Whenever he's doing something, he's seeing the spiritual and psychological consequences of what he's doing. So he doesn't look at physical without the metaphysical, doesn't look at the metaphysical without physical. So it is a really, out of the box way of thinking about it, in a sense that, the box that we're talking about is the Platonic idea, which dominates the West, so that everything is in a box and you care more about the boxes. Even if there is nothing in there, you just protect the boxes. Whereas universe, there's no box in the universe. And you're just trying to let your mind go across all of that. So absolutely. Thank you so much, Paul. Next up is Morris, followed by Joe. Morris.
Yeah, thank you, Shrikant. I'm going to just recite some of the words that he said in the very beginning of the interview that's really stood out to me. And so here's a couple of them. I didn't have to make money with my boat. For me, that's a very boots to the ground statement. It's a very, very practical statement. It's kind of like an aha moment where something's not right in a deep, deep level. And then I'm just going to go through a couple of these. I could get on with the Navy thing, but I couldn't get on with the money thing. This made me think I better do some deep thinking about this. Give up thoughts, loyalties, beliefs, because that is a part of the game. I had to give up thoughts, loyalties, and belief because that is a part of the game. Accepting claim of physical phenomena without experience. He couldn't accept claims. No, he said belief is accepting claims of physical phenomena without any experiential evidence. Huge. If I give up on my beliefs, I'm going to go entirely on my own experience. Again, huge. And then the last one I wrote down, there's the patois, a set of cliches that go along with this game. A parrot game, conditioned reflexes. I'll try to be, maybe I've got like 3 minutes left. So Kirby, I think you've often touched on the fact that Fuller's time in the Navy was very, very important and very, very developmental for him. And it's not and it's kind of, it's not brushed under, the rug, but it would be fun to actually really, really focus on that period of time and how it did affect him. My connection to Bucky was immediate when I heard him say, you're a tremendous bundle of experience. And he, at that moment, just validated my whole life, something that I knew intuitively. And it was like, I am literally worth doing. I am action doing. I am valuable just because I am alive. And it's kind of like, okay, what do I do now? And it goes back to that experience. And I would say, how do I platform this experience? Fuller was fantastic at it. And that's very, very inspiring. So that's primary. And going to the, the academic, it's funny, some of you know that I'm actually in graduate school in psychology. And it's madness. It's madness. And I find myself naturally, whatever I'm studying something, I'm finding myself naturally going to what would be considered its opposite in order to bring myself back into some sort of balance. And because these academic approaches or ways or structures are being brought as a means to heal humanity, it's the thing that I said the other day to a group of guys, it's like, I think in most therapy modalities are inherently cynical. Because I mean, the next thing, and then I'll finish with this, going back to that, you're a tremendous bundle of experience. And if a nail's knocked into a tree, the tree will go around it. I've always been questioned about whether I have a learning disability or not, and in ways I fought that my whole life, because it's just like I learned a different way due to how I was raised, what I saw, what I experienced around me. And that doesn't put me in this side on a left side or a right side. That doesn't put me on a different team. I think it goes back to that thing. I'm a unique individual. I'm not with a unique skill set of experience. And I'm not a conditioned reflex. I'm not a set of cliches, nor will I buy into a set of cliches. And it's hard work. Anyway, and I with Shrikant, with what you were saying about the Tao and metaphysical and physical and physical, metaphysical and physical, and I'm thinking sailing wise, it's just like you just keep tacking and jibing, tacking and jibing, tacking and jibing. Go to the wind, find the wind, tack and jibe, tack and jibe. So that's what I've got to say.
Wonderfully put. Wonderfully put. I think that's a great analogy, the sailing analogy. I'd not thought of it. That's just beautiful, because it's like you're saying wind is what it is. Whether I tack or jibe depends on the wind. And wind flows where it flows. Okay. I also like the expression, this great bundle of experiences. One thing I like about Bucky, many people find Bucky hard to figure out, because he doesn't kind of speak continuously about a topic. He'll write this and he'll write that, and they complain. But to me, that's not the point. The point is really the core of Bucky is his operation. See the way in which he can speak for hours about anything and everything and just go through everything. I mean, that's basically engaging in the present with all of the universe or any part of it that you are engaged with. I mean, that is living, that's showing the value of the present that you have and respecting the present and doing the best you can within it. So I love that term, the great bundle of experiences. Thank you. Thank you so much. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Kirby. Joe.
Just really quickly, I haven't heard everybody else's comments, so forgive me being a little bit late. I think one of the most important things is, and I'm sure this has already been mentioned, is the idea of thinking for yourself. And how did Bucky actually go about that? And we have to, think about, transcendentalism had a huge impact on Bucky. And I think that actually, when you're talking about thinking for yourself, that's a big part of it. And they also look at nature very closely. So what does it mean in the sense that you're following your intuition? And that is a very big part of transcendentalism, in the sense that that can drive imagination, creativity, and too many times if we're thinking with only our rational brains, we're conforming to social norms. And if you're conforming to social norms, you're not going to necessarily change anything. So I think that that's one of the most important things, and we're encouraged to not make mistakes, he talks about. And I think when you think of things like mystique, and some of these other things that we've covered here, mistakes are essential in order to be creative. The other aspect of this is that how, I'm sorry, I'm just actually gathering my thoughts. It's also, was it was something about the rationality that I was thinking about. I'm gonna have to come back to it.
That's all right. Let me comment on the transcendental part.
Yeah.
And then Joe, whenever you're ready, you can come back.
Yeah.
So, I would recommend looking at the Indian philosophy. We've studied the Bhagavad Gita because transcendentalism is based on the Indian philosophy. And the point here, and this is something that I just, we're going on, when is this? Yeah, coming Friday, we're going to be doing Bhakti Yoga. And we had this amazing gentleman, Yogeshwar, who did this meetups, the Gita meetups with us. So we're going to be discussing that. So I want to take one of the metaphors that he used to describe this. And so he says, look, you're like a drop of water. You're like a drop of the water, and the universe, or Brahma, is like ocean. Okay, you have some salt in it, and you think of yourself as salt, and that's your ego. You're attached to the specific manifestations you have, whether your wealth, whether your intelligence, whether your thoughts, your habits, your emotions, your family, your position in the society, your job, whatever. But all of that is salt. But at the root of it, you are a spirit, you have a soul, you have a consciousness, and that has a universal nature to it. And so you are a drop of water. Now, you're trying to go to the ocean, right? So you can go to the ocean, but there are these rivers that go to the ocean. So you can drop yourself into a river that is going to the ocean. The river is not the ocean, but it is that which is figured out how to get to the ocean. Like somebody like Bucky is like a river, okay? He's able to get you. He's at least moving towards the ocean. You know that he's trying to move towards the ocean. So what the transcendentalists do is to see the commonality between the core of you, the core of the universe, and see that commonality in things that they see. So they see that in other persons. They see it in systems that are there. And by having these multiple perspectives, not just seeing it as you and the universe, but also seeing these intermediate things, are 10,000 things that are created by the Tao. You're trying to actually see those principles operative in everything that you encounter. And then when you encounter it, there is an affinity you have towards it. There is this self-affinity that you have, the same affinity you have for the universe, you have for other people, you have for other systems that you're working on to move it towards the ocean. So that is a metaphor that Yogeshwar talked about, which is very apropos here, because this is his way of thinking. This is Bucky's way of thinking, and that's why you are the drop of ocean. There is all this water around you. It is raining on you. There are these streams. There are wells, and there is water in these organisms we call people, and it's all there. And there is that commonality that you're trying to figure the universal laws of, and you're working off. So thank you, Joe. Joe, if you have a quick point, we can go to you. Okay, then let's go to Kirby, Richard, Jeannie, and then Joe. Kirby.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to speak to the transcendentalism thing, and also to, because Fuller is even keel, back to the sailing messenger, he didn't demonize, because he thought everyone could he thought the world as a species, he thought humans in collaboration with the rest of the ecosystem could do a good deal. We could make this planet a great place. And he really believed that. So whether we believe it or not, you have to give him that. I think it's tremendously liberating for him to truly believe that we have a shot at it as a whole. Like, even if you don't believe it, you can see how that would be liberating, however diluted that might be. Like, we could always say, well, he was wrong or something about that. But he felt, hey, and now that I'm in this mindset, things are really clicking for me. And it wasn't like, how can I impress people with how smart I am? You know, I'll go figure it out and write another book or something. It was more like, because I'm in this mindset of wanting to help everybody, I'm being deluged, I'm being hit with all these insights. And so when he did write a book like Critical Path, it just, when I read him, it was just like, who else tells history like this? And I'm not even talking about the ancient history, I'm talking about recent history, like the invention of radio and television. And he's talking about how, you know, in the old days, it was like the dad was the authority, the patriarch, and they knew the world. They were like the king, the local king. And then TV comes along, and there are these people on television who seem to know what's going on in the world. And they have this gravitas, this knowledge of the world that's coming from like some corporate, wherever the news is coming from, that changes their idea of what their parents know or don't know about the world. They don't know. My parents aren't in charge, actually. It's these TV people and something going on there. And they start to think differently about, you know, their own families and who knows what. And anyway, he's kind of on a pilgrimage with the new generation. We'll call them the boomers. And they see that in him. It's like, here's an old guy, this bohemian, but he's resonating with us. He talks in a way that we can groove on. And yet he never disassociated himself from the military. He never, even through the Vietnam War or everything, you know, he has great passages on the Vietnam War. He talks about how parents love their kids to pieces, which I always take as a dark way of writing, but he's in with the Pentagon. He actually has one of his experimental dwellings constructed right at the center of the physical Pentagon building. And he's on good terms with Washington, D.C. And they're like, he's a good PR for us. That's why they let him do the pavilion in '67, opposite the Soviet pavilion, and the Moscow Dome and all this. So he's rubbing elbows with top leaders in the world, right? And big intellectuals. So of course he's thinking, my God, I flipped a switch somewhere where when I started to commit to all humanity, I'm suddenly traveling around the world and meeting all the Indira Gandhi's my best friend and all this stuff, right? And he, in Synergetics, he wants to kind of explain that. Like, he creates his own metaphysics internal to which there's this relationship between what he calls the mind and what he calls the brain. And the brain is that reflex condition thing that we are robotic 99%, and we have to be. It's like, you can't rethink all your reflexes in just, you know, meditation maybe helps a lot when you get time to do nothing, but you know, you got to drive a car, you got to go shopping. There's a lot of instant reflexing that you need, and thinking is the same. I think artificial intelligence is putting that in the mirror for us in a lot of ways, that how much thinking really is just someone says this, it triggers that. And you always say cubed when you see to the third power. You don't really have a choice. You are brainwashed, and that's okay. We each get to, that's the experimental part of it, is we all get brainwashed in various ways and stumble around kind of as zombies, but we learn something that we contribute back. You know, we learn how humans need to go by each one of us being a guinea pig, and he was like guinea pig B. But I did want to emphasize how even when he was like the darling of the hippies and he was seen as anti-war activist and giving us a positive future vision, he was also on the inside with his friends in DC and wherever. And then at the end, it kind of seemed to fall apart, right? Because he got very radical, and it seems, you might think, but then he got a Medal of Freedom right after he writes Crunch of Giants. It's all very exciting and interesting history that we don't teach. And that's interesting. Just the fact that we don't teach much about Bucky, to me, is a hugely important thing. It's just interesting. Like, wow, really? That's interesting that you would do that. Anyway, I digress. Back to y'all.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Kirby. I really like all the color you're adding and all the context you're adding, because you can't really understand the man without all of this. I really appreciate that. Next up is going to be Richard, followed by Jeannie. Richard.
Yes. It's nice that I'm able to follow Kirby, because I've just come out of what I would call a very humbling week in Portland, Oregon, part of which was an opportunity for Kirby and I to meet for a coffee, pizza on Saturday afternoon. And that is part of the journey that we've had. We first met over an email sort of exchange, dialogue in 1999 for about 3 days in a row. Then didn't have anything to do with each other until TrimTev came along, and we had those kinds of Zoom meetings. And then the beauty of being able to meet in person 23 years later, but nonetheless, it's sort of like that journey was a destiny journey. But what I want to talk about, I spent a week, most of the week in Portland, Oregon at the American Association of Suicidology's annual conference. And it was the 40th anniversary of my organization, Living Works Education, and we were the primary sponsor of that meeting. And there was about 1,500 people there in person. I don't know how many online. And we had a number of key people presenting. Some were Indigenous Australians talking about their 60,000 years of civilization against the few hundred years of colonialism and coming through and out of that. Talked about the work that's being done in construction industries. So all of this speaks to the platform that we used of the tetrahedron and turning it into an intervention platform that wasn't just a couple of triangles that we pulled out of the sky. It was connected to the groundings of Fuller's work, in particular the tetrahedron. And the other humbling part about this is that I was recognized with one of their major awards, and I had absolutely no idea that was going to happen. And it was quite something to be kind of stunned with that recognition when they announced something that you thought some other name was going to come out, and all of a sudden you hear it's yours. But so what I'm getting at is that platform, the tetrahedron platform, it marks the 40th anniversary of our organization. And then when you think about it, it's the 40th anniversary of Bucky's death. It's the 40th anniversary of BFI that's followed out after that. And for me, I started in this kind of work in 1968, which makes it my starting year. It also is this American Association of Suicidologies. It was their starting year. I had no idea who they were when I started my work in one part of Canada. And then you take it all the way back to 1927, And all of these things I didn't learn up front. I had to learn over time. And then when I realized that Bucky had this Chicago experience of considering whether or not life was worth living, and decided that he was going to take the position that he was part of universe, and it wasn't for him to decide that he should go at that particular point. So what I'm getting at too is that in some ways I have worked with worked for 100% of the humanity. But what we ended up doing in our suicide prevention work was start with a paradigm that was suicide prevention, i.e. we can stop this. Then it shifted in the direction of what we were calling suicide safer living. We weren't saying that it can be stopped, absolutely. Maybe that's the audacious goal. But we wanted to, and I realize now what I was doing, and I didn't articulate it in that language until now, is that we're really working for suicide living for 100% of humanity without damage or harm to anyone else. And I think some people have now added on not only humanity, but not harming nature and not harming our foundations in that sense. And so it's really been an interesting kind of journey to realize that this discussion this week, what I went through this week, and the 40th anniversary of several things, all goes back to Bucky's 1927, and as we've been saying earlier tonight, the contextual environment that he grew up in from the time he was born through his Harvard experience and the Navy and so forth, and his own setbacks in life, all sort of funneled into what he decided to set out and do. And in some ways, I realize that what we're trying to do in Suicide Safer Living is to carry on his legacy in this practical, down-to-earth, face-to-face way in which we've seen many people turn away from suicide and turn in the direction of suicide safer living, not necessarily suicide is out of their life forever. They may, in fact, be living with suicide in the same way that those of us that live with chronic illnesses, whether it's diabetes or something else, we know some of the ways in which we can continue to live good lives, even though we continue to have whatever the condition is. And for some people, suicide is a lifelong condition that they may or may not act on. We're only thinking, just like Bucky, that maybe I should live a little longer because maybe there's something in me that might be worthwhile to someone else. And so for some people, that means I'm going to live tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and you realize, well, maybe I'll live till the next day. And then it starts to take on a life of its own. And every next day becomes a next day and a next day and a next day. And the next thing you know, somebody has died the good life in the kind of natural way you might expect any one of us to die. So that's, I really value the opportunity to talk out my experience this week in the way in which this week was set up for us to talk. It's like another serendipity to allow me personally, in this case, and to unwind out of a very powerful week for me. So thank you all for that.
Wonderful. Richard, thank you. Thank you so much. Firstly, congratulations for the award. And I'm delighted that you got to meet Kirby. And for you and for everybody here, I'm in New York, center of the universe. And I know because of the gravity, everybody passes through here. So when you're passing through New York, please reach out to me. I'd love to meet with you in person. I'm a big fan. I love these Zoom meetups, but I'm also a very big fan of face-to-face meetings. because what happens is that it is through this dialogue, not just written material, but through this kind of back and forth dialogue that we all grow. So thank you so much, Richard. Next up is going to be Jeannie. Jeannie, go ahead.
I wanted to go on about the suicide thing as what I think, and it's something that's been pointed out to me in terms of people who want to be a success, is that you need a narrative about your life. And I think it's important to get some kind of story of your life that points in some direction that you want to see it point. And I thought also, because I remember Bucky, I mean, he was sort of a guru, but he really stood out of a crowd, in a crowd, you know, with everybody wearing, you know, bell bottoms and, you know, very casual. And he was always in this suit. But it's another way to guarantee your success is to make yourself stand out in some kind of, you know, visual way. So he was some of these things, they seem just sort of, you know, homey, but they're not. They're actually, you know, pretty well thought out methods of getting your message out. And, you know, on the story of your life, I don't know how many of you had to write your autobiography in 7th grade, you know, everybody does, but, you know, do we write it again? Well, you should, you know, again, look at your life and try to, you know, write the story that you want to see it be. We tell ourselves the story of our lives all the time, you know, and for many people, it's a lot of complaints and, you know, nobody wants to hear it. If the story has some kind of compelling direction, basically, I mean, you know, the rock bottom is important, but it's, you know, that you're going up from there. And I think that's a very important thing. People have told me that I should write the story of my life, and I've tried to do it in pictures, but it's, you know, it's one of the methods of gaining success in what you're trying to do.
Thank you, Jeannie. I very much remember the scroll that you had prepared when we were working on Dante. So if you can write Dante's story on a scroll, I'm sure you can write your own story on the scroll, and it's going to be amazing. So thank you, Jeannie. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Mike. Joe.
Yeah, I do want to actually just build on this idea that, you know, where Bucky actually did face the question, and I know a lot of people have brought this up, whether or not to take his own life, and to Jeannie's point, he actually found a purpose, and the purpose was actually to live, you know, make society work for everyone. And when you start to think about that, you have that kind of moment in your life that you start to, it is a rebirth. And essentially now you're starting anew, and you kind of look at everything differently. And I think that is something that's critical when you're thinking about spherical thinking and how to look at the world, and how it's connected, and look at through multiple perspectives. Because you can do that because you've gone through something that it's transformative, and you realize what's really meaningful. So you're not necessarily allowing everything in the world that you're dealing with to impact your judgment. And so having a moment like that is truly allows for a rebirth, and to not necessarily give in to conventional wisdom. And you can kind of see this also with a lot of his other concepts that he had come up with. If we were even to talk about something like, we've talked about normalization here, and how that countered a narrative of scarcity and Malthusian thinking. And from that perspective, you also have to have, a different way and be able to imagine the world differently. I mean, there was, a lot of people that subscribe to the way Malthus would actually, is mathematics, but it didn't imagine the world doing things differently, the world being better at what, doing more with less. It looked at the world as it was and in a very concrete way. So I think that his ability to, have that experience, I think it was kind of critical if you're thinking about it in terms of how to take different perspectives on life and not necessarily worry about the consequences. And because you've overcome one of the most major one where you're contemplating taking your own life. So I think that's I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. Next up is going to be Mike, followed by Kirby. Mike.
You've got a large group of people here, and I got some loose threads about Bucky that I'd like to try to get tied together, and maybe this is the right group to do it. At the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art on 53rd Street, they have a room with a Bucky exhibit, and it discusses Renaissance that Bucky had probably in the early 1930s, and right before that, his suicide moment occurred, and several other things started to occur. Now, he's a different kind of architect than Louis Sullivan or Frank Lloyd Wright was, particularly before 1930. We have a situation where something happened in 1930 that, beside the Depression and his suicide, that set him on a different course. And one of the threads is a French, Swiss, Austrian architect named Le Corbusier, who had a noted reaction in Europe, got involved in his life. Now that led to the Dymaxion car, which is talked about in the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art. The Dymaxion car never really went anywhere, but it looks remarkably like, even though it has 4 wheels rather than 3, like the Volkswagen car that later was produced in Germany in large quantities. Now, is there any thoughts on the part of your august assembled people on that Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art and the relationship with Le Corbusier, who had a much more complicated non-real name as an architect, and what that had to do with Dymaxion? There's probably some more threads in that I can populate, but I don't have the total picture on how Buckminster Fuller tied in with Le Corbusier and with Frank Lloyd Wright and Louis Sullivan.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Let me see if anybody would anybody like to talk about it? Does anybody have anything to say about the relationship between these architects and the influence some of them might have had on Bucky, or any kind of back and forth? You're welcome to type ! You can do that at any point, but let me start by going to Kirby. Kirby, you had a point. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna riff off Jeannie's mention of his wearing a suit a lot and how he kind of stood out as dress for success man. And I wanted to relate that to his sense of authority, what I was saying before, or what he's an astute observer of human nature. I think once you let go of whatever, once you let the universe teach you, you become a PR genius. I think in a lot of ways, he tightly managed his own public relations, you could call it. He didn't turn that over to, like, get me as a speaker, list me in a speaker's bureau. I'm available, I'm on tap. A lot of people, they turn over publicity to so-called experts. But I think this is an area where he felt he was a trim tab. He was a pioneer. He was really, in his own mind, more effective at PR than anyone else could be on his behalf, which isn't that big a statement to make because he had such esoteric ideas. But as part of being an astute observer of human nature, I think he saw throughout his life how the computer as a meme was evolving, how people were thinking that computers they could tell us what to do. Like, we'll put all our information in the computers and they will tell us this was the world game chapter. Let's create a whole model of the world in our computers and feed it a lot with data. And I wanted to say on that point, we had Medard Gabel, who was a world game instigator, organizer, workshop with the giant maps that they'd fill out a gymnasium, and he'd travel around the world with Bucky's blessing to do these workshops, inheriting from what Fuller called world game, where he would get like grad students together. It's like once he did get an appointment in a university, what did he do? He would get, a lot of these design people and architects to be would flock to he's a big name already, come to his workshop, and he'd start doing this world game. And he's like, yeah, we got to get world data. Like, we got to get up to date on everything. Like, this is his empirical approach. And there's a chart, I actually have it in my photo stream that Medard shared, of Bucky like coaching his students, his world game workshop people, who to phone, who to call to get information about world electrical grids. We need to know who's got them. What are the Chinese grids like right now? And this is back in the 60s. And he's got right there in his diagram, call the CIA. And Medard actually did. And then right next to that's another box that says, call the Russian embassy. It's like he was teaching grad school kids to have no fear. And it's like, this is your planet. You got to get on with design here. Here are all these quote unquote, authorities. Call them up. And as far as his own projection of himself, what he would say about wearing that suit is, in Greenwich Village, he was more like dressing like a bohemian. He had a t-shirt, probably had cigarettes rolled up in his sleeve. I don't know, more like, an early hippie, proto-hippie, earlier generation. And you can read in the actual histories, he went through with like a cohort of famous people through Greenwich Village. And then later come the boomers with, the names that we recognize as the boomers. But anyway, he said, dress like a banker. That's what he came to. And that projected this sense that he was somehow plugged in. He was kind of an authority. And he was, he projected himself kind of as the establishment. And that goes all the way through, even when he's being super subversive and sounding like he's super anti-establishment. At the very same time, he's like running the establishment to listen to him. At one point, he talks about my Ford Motor Company. All through his little essay, my. It's like, Bucky, what do you mean yours? But I think he was the chief captain of the grunch that he writes about, that we project on that. We say, oh, that's evil grunch of giants, all the giant corporations. But for him, these were the vehicle that could morph into our dress for success, right? We need all these hotels. He talked about Sheraton, Belltel as kind of like one big Hilton, Bell in one phrase. It's just all this big conglomerate that he wasn't afraid of. I think a lot of us are consumed by fear. And just to finish on the computer, it sounds naive looking back. You read his old stuff, it's like, oh, we'll put all our information in the computer and figure things out. But I think he was just tracking, as an anthropologist, how people did treat computers and talk about them. And he was projecting ahead. And by the time he gets to Grunch of Giants, he's writing about the cosmic computer. He's got a chapter saying you can't fool the cosmic computer. And so he's back to mind versus brain. It's just like we've caught up with him now. And we're thinking of the computer more like he was thinking of it, as something more cosmic. And now with AI scaring everybody, I think we're getting even closer to the time he kind of was a native of. He's kind of like a future person coming back into the past, into the 1900s, even into the 1800s. Where was he coming from? I think he's coming from closer to now. And the things that he pioneered, like, he invented this kind of loping way of running to stay in shape. Now everybody calls it jogging. It's not a big deal anymore. And he scrapbooked his whole life all the time. And now everyone does things on Facebook and social media. So he was just like he did paleo diet before that. Was like, I see him as about 30 to 40 years ahead of his time. Now we're all turning into little Buckies now. All right.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kirby. Next up is going to be Jeannie, followed by Evanik, folks, and then I'm going to ask you a question. You can think about it while we're wrapping up. So CJ came up with these ideas of the 4 on-ramps. And that was brilliant, because what he was saying was that different people have different proclivities and different strengths. They're comfortable with some things they're, it's harder for them. So work on all these 4. So first one is design, which is all about making things. The second one is geometry, which is all mathematical. The third is collaboration, very intense collaboration in order to learn. And fourth is integrative. This is about kind of holistic thinking, transcendentalism, that kind of thing that we're talking about. So the question I have for you folks is that, what are your strengths? If you wanted to say which of these things really appeal to you. 4-point scale. 4 means appeals most, 3 less, 2, and you can say multiple 4s or multiple 1s, doesn't matter. So I have put something in the chat which says design ? Geometry ? Collaboration ? And integrative ? If you could replace the question mark with whatever numbers you think. If you're very, if it's something that really speaks to you, it's 4. It doesn't speak to you at all, is 1. 3 is kind of strong, and 4th is kind of 2 is good. So 4 is excellent. 3 is good. 2 is okay, and 1 is not much. So you can put the numbers at your convenience if you want. I just want to see where the most of the people are, because I'm trying to actually achieve like a mix of all these 4 on-ramps. I want to tell you that the next one coming up is Casey House, and he's going to be talking about, he says, what shall I talk about? I said, talk about whatever you want to talk about. He said, I want to talk about my entire life's work. I said, sure. So that's what he's going to be talking about. So it's going to be incredible. All right. I just wanted to give you this and give a chance for people to give their feedback. But please, I'm not cutting anything off. Please continue. Next up is going to be Jeannie, followed by Evanik. Jeannie.
I wanted to, say something else about Bucky's secret for success. And one of the things he did is he communicated with all kinds of people. And I think Corbusier was one of those people. I mean, he was not afraid to just write a letter. He wrote somebody explaining Einstein's theory of relativity, totally out of his field, but he had the guts to go ahead and write it. He wrote to Coxeter, who was the primary geometer at that time, not afraid, just engage with other people. And then when he had his students, he got them to really, do a lot of hard work. I think, some may complain a little about it, but he was able to get other people going on his ideas. And when he says the thing about how, he didn't know how he made money anymore, and, that was when he was 80 and all, but, he had somebody that I met, Shirley Sharkey, and she did all of his bookkeeping for him. He didn't look at that stuff anymore. He was busy with his other stuff, and she took care of everything. And she was one of those people who, was very faithful to him and, worked really hard for him. I wanted to say my own opinion about the 4 on-ramps. I guess, probably integrity would be at the top for me, and with a close second of geometry. But I have to say, with collaboration, I feel like I've been an absolute failure collaborating with people. And maybe that's not even true, but it's very, very difficult to find somebody that wants to work on the things that I want to work on, and to be able to, put our heads together to do it. It's, I don't know, in a way, maybe that's what CJ and I were doing, but in a way, I feel like collaboration is very, very hard. In the Synergetics Collaborative, I often complain that where was the collaboration? Because everybody, it's the ego thing, it's so hard to let go of your own idea and, at least take half of somebody else's on to mix with yours, or somehow, I'm not in favor of just giving up all my ideas and, following somebody else's, but I don't know, collaboration is really hard.
Thank you, Jeannie. Folks, I would love to have everybody talk about this one if it's okay. So I will speak for myself. For me, collaboration is easy. I think this is what I've been doing. So I would say for me, the number one is the integrative part. This kind of holistic way. I think the study of Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, and the Gospel of John that we have done, and connecting it up with science and with everything else has been really life transformative for me. And then collaboration is what we do in the meetups. Give me just a second. Hold on. Okay. All right. Just a second. Okay, there. So in terms of, I would say geometry, I have a math background of, I did electrical engineering, which requires a lot of math, but I don't like much of the math. So I'm kind of, I'm trying to work with it. And to kind of go back to it, because I think, unfortunately, a lot of my thinking about math was too platonic. So, but at the same time, I seem to have some facility for it. So I'm kind of going back to it. And in terms of the design, I'm not particularly good, but I still, I do things like I build up these complex things as a way. This is like a tetrahedron. This is a icosahedron with all the skeletons. So you can see all 20 of the tetrahedrons inside it. So that's kind of my profile, but would love to hear what everybody else's thoughts are on the 4 on-ramps and how these meetups have been helping you guys. Evanik, would you like to share next?
Sure. The one thing I wanted to share before that was, and which is the reason why I hit
Sure.
the exclamation point, was I think Kirby brought up, in naivete. And I remembered from the video, Bucky is like, being naive is the way to be, because that's the only way we truly learn, is to be naive, and to, when we think we know something, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but is when we get ourselves in trouble, when we really think we know something. That means there's no room for growth. So when you brought it up, I was just like, yeah, this one thing I didn't hear people saying is that, Bucky was a great fan of being naive. That way you're always in that learning phase. And I don't think he meant like naive, like being a pushover or, anything like that. But in terms of learning, like always being willing to learn something new. In terms of the 4, I have put it in the chat. And I think collaboration is my strongest one, followed by integration. I just think that's the way my mind works. I work off of other people's ideas, and integration. Although I do understand Jeannie's point about like not wanting to, give away your own ideas or, put your ideas in someone else's hands. I totally get that too. But I think those are my 2 strongest ones. And I think design, because I thought I knew what design was, and then I realized I don't. Like, I know design in terms of processing or processes and creative designing a process for like work. I can do that, but that's about all I know. And then geometry, no, just no. I think the Bucky meetups have helped, like when I'm listening to other people that know something about geometry and how it works and how it fits into the real world. And, so the Bucky meetups have helped with geometry. So maybe I could say I'm a 1, but for the most part, I think, yeah, that's like my weakest one is geometry, definitely by far. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Evanik. And folks, if you want to comment on what these meetups have done, for example, for me, Strupi's meetups on geometry have been extremely helpful to me, of being able to rework geometry from this, spheres, kind of, from nature, instead of the Platonic way. So it's really amazing to have all these people who are very strong at some things communicate that. And I think these meetups, 52 Living Ideas, our real strength is collaboration. So we get an opportunity for people who are at whatever level to kind of raise up, and also enable people who are at a high level in something to communicate to people who don't fully get that, and do that with just tremendous amount of patience on both sides. So, and I think it works very well, because we are, I think the collaboration works very well here. But would love any comments from anybody. So it's going to be Maritza, Joe, Paul, and Maurice. Maritza.
So it's funny, Shrikant. I had my order set up before you commented on yours, and then I was like, wait. So I had not considered that 52 Living Ideas was a practice in collaboration. And that sounds silly to say out loud, but I think of it as, this is we're integrating different concepts. And so I thought of it as integration, and I was more like Jeannie in that, collaboration, I'm not super great at that. So I think of myself as a great floater. Like, I can float among just about any group. Like, I know just enough about such a variety of things that I can just, I'm almost never like the awkward one who can't fit in, but I don't actually fit in. I can just kind of pop in and out. So in my mind, I think, well, I don't really collaborate great with others, because I'm the one who, in my master's dissertation, I looked at my team and I'm like, look, for some of you, a B is acceptable. For me, nothing but an A is acceptable. So you need to get with the program now, or I'm going to drag you kicking and screaming. And then I would be, the really friendly one who would redo stuff because they didn't do it well enough. So I don't necessarily think of myself as a good collaborator, but when I look at it from the perspective of that's what we're doing here, it does give me pause, and it it redefines the idea of collaboration for me, which is kind of awesome. And maybe I'm not as bad as I thought. And B, it almost makes it impossible to pick an order those you can't, because if what we're doing here at 5211 Ideas is collaboration, that means then that I am much better at geometry and design than I would have postulated on my own, because by myself, I am truly illiterate when it comes to design. But with the community of 5211 Ideas, we are practicing, and I am learning and growing every day. So maybe that means that I'm not really at a 1 for design. Maybe I'm a little bit 1.5 because I have the aid of this group. So yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Marissa. I hate to disagree with you, but you're superb at collaboration. Exhibit A, there is this lady who runs this Mondays on collaborative poetry, and somehow manages to get all these creative people, no matter where they're coming from, all excited about doing poetry together.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, they interact with each other, and then you do the editing, you do the little bit
I do call it collaborative poetry.
Yes, and so I think yes, I think I'm sorry to disagree, but next up is going to be Joe.
Yeah, I mean, as far as what I'm getting out of the meetups, it really is hard to pinpoint one particular one, because I think that they all add something. You know, I've learned a great deal about geometry of thought and how these concepts actually manifest themselves in reality. How they specifically work within, I'd say, organizational design. In design in general is a challenge because it's so multifaceted, and it takes a lot of, you know, it just takes a lot of work. So you know, I have a long way to go in that particular area. I agree with you. Stroopy actually, you know, he was the first meetup, and he really did provide a way of kind of looking at Bucky that I had not considered with the 4 eyes, and I thought that was the you know, first step. I thought Kirby actually he made geometry very accessible, and something that you could go back over multiple times. And you know, everybody here has made Bucky's concepts much more practical. As far as the other categories themselves, I would say that I think I overrated myself with integration. I make that a little bit lower, and then collaboration I feel like is pretty good, because I think that where I can pick up on where people fit in, and I think that that's something that I'm currently able to apply to my job, and that is actually something that these meetups in general have reinvigorated me, I would say, in a way, to engage with some people, you know, that since COVID that I hadn't, and to really start to connect these concepts in different ways. And I think that these, in thinking about how nodes work, how the tetrahedron works, how leaky corners work, how the connections between the nodes, the strength between the nodes, I think all these principles that people have talked about here have reinforced that. And just even thinking about things how things connect together and how graphs work has been critical in how I communicate to some people I work with. So I think that that's these meetups have meant a great deal to me personally, but I also think as well, the most important thing is I think that it's making Buckminster Fuller's ideas accessible. And as Maritza said, that's a form of collaboration. And I think for me, that was CJ's vision. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that I think for me, the biggest growth here personally is on geometry. It is Strupi, it is, John, Yoshimi, it is Richard, it is Kirby, it is all of those folks who can just bring all of that in. And I'm learning a lot from that. Thank you. Next up is going to be Paul.
Yeah, I don't know if I interpreted your question about the numbers right, Shrikant. I put my numbers down from a point of view of interest as opposed to how good I am at it. Like, if I was going to say how good I was at it, it would be a different number. Like with geometry, I'm really not good, but my interest is strong.
Yeah, no, it is just the numbers are for how much it speaks to you right now.
Okay, yeah.
Your level of kind of knowledge and comfort with it.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'd put geometry a notch lower. And also, I'm really, the things I want to do more of. So you're saying that's where you would want to do more of in your meetups if people are missing that. Like, so I did misunderstand it maybe, but rather than dwell on that, another point in terms of what I hope to get and what I have gotten, this last little set of readings and things on Bucky, I love how he really takes the whole bull by the horns on applying these universal wisdom teachings in the real world. That's what I feel I want to learn most about. And he grapples with it. We talk about the Gospel of John, but then he writes his little version of history in Critical Path where the church just rolled over the world in a not nice way for centuries and centuries. And I don't want to gloss that over in these meetups. I want to say, okay, we love these wisdom teachings and we can dive very deep and we can ask others to dive deep, but what about their impact and how do we make them accessible in a way that achieves the visions he talks about? I don't know if I'm making any sense, but that's what I get already from these meetups and I want more of.
Wonderful.
Category is that design and integrative and collaboration and geometry. Sorry.
All right, all of the above. The next up is going to be Maurice. Maurice, go ahead.
Yeah, Shrikant, I misunderstood the question too. The first thing in terms of design, what does design actually mean? And this is an actual question.
Sure. So what CJ meant by design ramp, that means it's all about making things. It's about architectural design, actually putting things together, building things based on principles.
Okay. So I said in in my answer, I put life design in quotes. So I would with what you defined it, I would think me as a yoga teacher teaching a yoga class is doing the same thing. So I would say 3. In terms of what's the next one? Geometry? Yeah. I think it was Paul. Paul, I don't know many people. I think Paul was just before me. I'm similar with him there. I have no understanding whatsoever of synergetic geometry. And I would like to see it put into a space. He does it, I think, a little bit in Fuller's Earth. I would like it to be I would like to be shown, I would like to see it being able to be presented in a way that a 6-year-old can understand it. I think a lot of it is because I was raised on a farm, and I put there in terms of geometry, it was 1. In terms of farming and sailing, it's a 4, because a farmer is a mathematician. He is both a mathematician and a gambler. And I think I dropped away from math in high school because it wasn't practical. It stopped being practical. And my way of learning geometry now is to learn sailing. Okay, so there's that. In terms of collaboration, I'm new to the group. I don't think I'm a great collaborator, except when I'm on stage. If I'm doing improv, if I'm doing acting with the group of people, and then I'm incredible. And then I think the last one was
integrative or kind of holistic thinking.
integrative 4, definitely. That's a slam dunk.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maurice. Next up is Richard.
Thank you. Well, I was working with the tetrahedron and the corners and the edges in my mind. So when I was thinking of design, I was thinking of that is in a structural way. I was thinking of geometry and I was thinking of collaboration as in the power of the prefix co. And I was thinking of integration as the tensional part. So I was thinking integration didn't belong as a node, it belonged as one of the 6 times interconnections. And so that left an open space for the fourth node, what might it be? And so I kind of left it at that in terms of thinking about it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Richard. And thank you, folks. This was an amazing meetup. Would love to do more of these in the future. Take something by Bucky and do this. So let me tell you about what's coming up. We've got Casey House talking about his life's work on synergetics next weekend, next Sunday at 9 p.m. Next, on May 7th, it's Kirby. We're going to decide what topic it is. I don't know if Kirby has any comments about it. I'm going to throw it to Kirby if he wants. Next up is going to be Rupali, my friend Rupali. She's going to be talking about education and Montessori and Bucky's ideas on education. And then after that is going to be Kurt doing his chapter 3. That's what is set so far. Again, if you would like to make a presentation, go ahead and just reach out to me. I have a few slots available in June and I think end of May as well. So would love to hear from you. All right. So Kirby, do you know what you're going to do?
Yeah, I was just in the chat about it. I want to talk about education as well. So I'll be a good segue to the Montessori talk, because I also want to talk about stuff at that level, like Maurice was saying, six-year-olds and up. I think a lot of people mystify Bucky's geometry as being something you needed a PhD in physics first or something, but I don't think so for what I want to talk about.
Perfect. So Bucky's geometry for 6-year-olds.
Make that 16-year-olds.
16-year-olds? Oh no. Then what?
High school.
What will?
But you could go.
Maureen,
Six-year-olds.
disappointed.
6-year-olds.
The little kids already kind of get it. It's the older people I want to.
6-year-olds are
the old
rebelling, Kelly. Kirby. 6-year-olds are rebelling against your position against them. So we'll have to figure it out. Okay. All right, folks. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Bye.